Aye, carrying on with how I became a trader. To roll the intro, and I'll tell you. Hi, welcome to the channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Langers and I am the Scruffy Trader. And if you haven't been here before, this video is a little bit different from what I normally do. I'm normally talking about trading in general, showing live trades, bits of education and having a laugh along the way. So if that part of it seems good, please click the subscribe button, generally helps. And take a look at the first part of how I became what I do for a living today. So carrying on from that, grab your coffee, because I've got mine, because we all know Scruffy likes a coffee, and I'll continue. It's a little bit like Jack and Ori, isn't it? I'll continue. In the last video you saw kind of the estate where I grew up in Pity Me, and the little shenanigans we did as kids, and it was just really to give you an idea of where I grew up, because I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. Everything I've ever had and achieved I've had to work for, even down to my education. You see, for all I came out of school with good grades and one thing and another, I always struggled with it. I was always good with numbers, but I couldn't spell for shit. I really couldn't. I still can't do it today. And my gran used to make me do word searches and everything all the time. And I remembered the words by pure memory rather than building up a word. But because she saw something that I couldn't quite grasp, she made me do it. Likewise, she made me work, and my mother carried that on. And it was instilled from my father as well. I mean, for all I was saying, we lived on a council estate and we didn't have a lot. I came from a big family, and big families have to be fed, so my dad worked every single shift he could to put bread on the table, and that's kind of the upbringing I had. And the reason why I ended up going to live with my gran is as a family gets bigger, a house seems to get smaller and you ship one of the kids out. Well, that happened to be me. And I think I got the better end of the deal, because my gran was very Victorian. This is right, that is wrong, there's nothing in the middle. And I spent a lot of time with my uncles, Uncle Terry and Uncle George, who were both police officers. And that's what I wanted to be. I genuinely wanted to be a police officer. And I thought that would have been my track in life. But when I left school, and the sort of mid-80s, the police academy that I was intending on going to was closed down. They decided that they weren't having police cadets anymore, and I had to go out into the world and get a little bit of life experience before you can join the police service. Anyway, I had a couple of options. I either go into the forces or I bide my time. Well, I ended up going on to a construction site in Canary Wharf in London, of all places. So there I am, this little bumpkin from Durham, shipped off down to the big smoke when I was just 17, 18-year-old. And the idea was just to do it for the summer while I figured out what I was doing with my life. Well, I ended up being there for about 4 years. And I kind of took to it. They put me through an apprenticeship, the company I worked for. And it was good for a while. I earned very good money. I was able to buy my first house when I was 19. Used to drive a nice car and all that sort of thing. And silly, as most people do when they're young, I got married at a very young age. And I thought life was good. This is it. You know, off onto the big world, if you like. But then there was a bit of a crash in the economy, and for those of you who are sort of my age, the interest rates spiked up to 15%. There was poll tax riots and God knows what. And there was a big denationalisation. All the national industries were sold off. And the company I worked for relied heavily on national power. I used to go around power stations as well as sort of working in the city of London because it was heavy construction what I was in. Any road, we were all out on our ear. No work. Construction industry was absolutely knackered. So there I am, qualified, but no work. You know, and I'm only a young kid. And not only am I a young kid, I was newly married and also a little child on the way, or was going to be on the way rather. So I needed to get a job pronto, and I fell into sales by complete accident. The only job I could get was a sales assistant in Curry's. It's an electrical retailer in the UK for those of you overseas. And because I had a love of the cinema and things like that, because every Saturday as a child I used to go to the cinema with my gran, and she loved sort of all the Disney films, and obviously I loved all the science fiction films and fantasy films of the time. And working in an electrical retailer where I'm selling TVs and video recorders was kind of almost second nature to me because I loved it. And because I loved it, I used to have quite a passion for it. And I met a chap there on a number of occasions, and he used to say, "You're too good for this. You know, you shouldn't be working in a shop, you should be a rep." I didn't know what a rep was. You know, for me, I thought when the construction industry was picking up, that's where I'll go back. Anyway, cut long story short, this chap offered me a job. Company car and a salary. And I thought, wow, this can't be right. But it was. And sure enough, I became a rep. Believe it or not, selling chips to pubs, frozen food into boozers. And did I like it? Not really. But I liked the money, and I liked the car, and the fact that my hands weren't getting cut to ribbons on a daily basis. And one of the rarities for me on the construction industry was I was educated. So I was always the outsider looking in rather than sort of being one of the gang, if you like. So I kind of set off on this sales path of being a rep, but being quite ambitious and always being that kind of sort of buying and selling things. Again, it was second nature to me, but it wasn't quite enough for me. I wanted to do it myself, but I never had the resources. So I thought the only way I can do it is to climb the ladder. And by hook and crook, I ended up getting a job for a medical company as a lowly account manager, just a little rep. And I worked my cotton socks off and worked my way up the ladder. And not only did I work my way up the ladder, every single piece of education that they threw at me, I took. So I was working during the day and it was night school at night. And I got God knows how many diplomas and business certifications because I did the lot. Because I thought it was the only way to crawl up the ladder. Because I noticed that for all I was better at sales than the person that was next to me, and I was certainly better than the team that I taught, they always seemed to have a little bit of edge because they had a university degree. So I had to always work that little bit harder to get that little bit further. And eventually I come to 29-year-old. I've got a couple of kids, and I just thought to myself, I can't do this for the next 30 years. I really can't. I want to work for me. You know, from being a kid, I controlled my own money and I made my own money. I needed to do this, and I was thinking to myself, well, I've got quite a bit in the bank because I'd worked hard You know, I've got my big company car, my company credit card for expenses, and it, on the outside it looked brilliant, you know, because I was forever in a manor house at a conference, and these conferences were sometimes overseas, and it just looked great. But I was married to the job, and I had no life, none whatsoever. I was very rarely at home, so I missed out on my sons growing up somewhat, and I used to try and make up for it by throwing money at them, which isn't really the right thing to do. And eventually something had to give, and I just decided, that's it, I'm going to start my own business. But what can you do? Well, I looked around at various things. I could buy and sell things. I always had and always will. And also, I have a skill set. I'm a plumber. I'm a very good plumber as well. But the difference between Joe Plumber in the paper and professional company is the added extras. And that's what I wanted to give. So I created a company that specialised in fitting bathrooms, and it did incredibly well. You know, and I ended up having a number of vans on the road and a good set of subcontractors working around me. And life was really, really good, you know. Then I got divorced. Life wasn't very good anymore. Lost the lot in one swout move like that. You know, because again, I was never at home. And anyway, that's a long story. But because of that, you go into overdrive. And part of that overdrive was, I'm trying to support making a new life as well as supporting an old life. And you end up working two jobs. So I was almost working round the clock. And I was absolutely exhausted because I'm bouncing from one job to the next, renovating houses on a night time. And I had an accident. It's pure stupidity. Went down the stairs by missing a step, and this happened. Not only had that just happened, I'd only just started dating Joanne as well. And I thought, this is it. Life's written off. You know, what on earth can I do? Well, Joanne took care of me, and I was literally left with nothing because I was completely spazzed. You know, and a few years later I ended up getting a metal neck because of that injury, and it's left me with permanent nerve damage in this hand. So my days on the tools and one thing and another were finished in one foul swoop. So all the hard work that I'd put into it was gone in an instant. Tragic. But I couldn't give in. I really couldn't. And I still need to contribute to the world, and that's why to this day I've never claimed a benefit in my life, not one, even when I was laid up, you know. And one of the reasons being is because when I was laid up I did have a little bit of money in the bank, and they just laughed at me, so I said, sod it, doesn't matter what happens to me, I'll make my own way. And that's what I did. So eventually the plumbing company had to be sort of dissolved away, but I didn't dissolve the company, I kept it. I just changed the entity because I was already buying and selling things on the side because it was something that I loved, and it happened to be plastic injection molds, model aircraft, that sort of thing. And it started in the back of the garage, so a little picture here. Then I put it into a small office unit that I used to have. Then I put it into a bigger office unit because we outgrew that. Then it went into another one, And then it became this. And that is where I spent a good 10-12 years. Built that factory up literally from nothing, and part of the process of it was obviously buying goods. And as it was growing, instead of dealing with wholesalers, I ended up dealing with distributors. And then from distributors we grew too big. We were dealing directly with manufacturers at source. And at that point I needed to start speaking with overseas clients. And when you're dealing with overseas clients, you have to deal in a base currency, which is normally the US dollar. Also did a lot in euro, but it was mainly the US dollar that we dealt in. And within a meeting that I had with one of the suppliers at one time, I was there with Jim, that's the chap with the white hair that you see in the staff photos. And I was trying to get the price down, as people normally do, you know, because I'm a bugger for it. And the conversation came up, I can't because the exchange rate's this. And at the time it didn't even compute to me. You know, I'm just, well, yeah, I'll buy more, I'll buy a container, get the price down. I can't because the exchange rate's this. And then Jim piped up about forward purchasing currency. And at the time I hadn't heard of it, didn't know what it was. And this is going back, bloody hell, 2006, 2007. When this conversation was taking place. And up until that point my only trading dealing would been buying shares in Northern Rock, British Telecom, that sort of thing, because I'd done a little bit of that, but currency trading, none of it, didn't even grasp it. But anyway, in the course of this conversation I was quite intrigued that you can make money by sitting on currency for a couple of months. And when we came back to the office, had a little bit chat about it, and I started to explore it, and that's what we did. So I used to buy currency to sit on it, to time my purchases for containers at a better price. And a lot of the time we get 10 to 20% more product by holding currency that we purchased. Now, as time went forward, that transpired into personal trading. And because I had the company behind me, I thought I was invincible, could do whatever I liked, you know. Drove my nice cars and one thing and another, and if I screwed it up, which I did on a regular basis when I was learning, the company just paid for it. In fact, the worst weekend I ever had was just shy of an £18,000 loss. Never did it again. It's the best lesson I ever learned, because I used to bugger off on 4-day weekend holidays quite regular, because I used to work 7 days a week, and I did a trade without stop loss, and it was the time of the French elections, and the DAX rocketed in the opposite direction to where I was, gapped up and kept on going, and when I came back on the Tuesday, the account was gone. So it taught me some very, very hard lessons, and what I did from there was I decided to knuckle down and went to various seminars all over the country. Went to a lot of banking seminars, and these things aren't cheap, you know, they're like £5,000 and £6,000 a go. And over the course of 10 years I went to loads of them and bought courses and one thing and another. And Jim used to sit on my shoulder because he used to say, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, this will be fine." You know, no, stop it. And what he taught me eventually, and it did sink in eventually, was simple as best. Look at high time frames. And that's what I did. And then eventually, after doing all the things that you guys will do, because I got caught with it as well, you know, thinking this is easy money and one thing and another, you learn that less is more. And then when the business closed, and bugger me did it close, it was built to a dizzy height, it was doing really well. Brexit came along, caused a massive price war. Then the banks pulled the plug on all businesses like mine because sales were going down, and got handed a £200,000 demand that I had to pay up in 7 days, and it might come as a shock, I didn't have it in my back pocket. And the banks can do that, you know, even though nothing was in arrears or anything like that, they just pull the rug from under you, take away your extended overdrafts, all that sort of thing, and you're left high and dry. And because I couldn't pay, I was technically insolvent, and it put me through a corporate bankruptcy, which I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. It is horrific what you have to go through. And they stripped every asset I had, every single one of them. So my beautiful cars, my house, my rental properties that I had, everything was gone. Like that. So 15 years of heartbreak and building up a business, you know, and especially when you saw that business almost destroyed through a stupid accident, it was heart-wrenching, and it really was. And I wouldn't, like I say, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And I had to reevaluate my life. What am I going to do? I'm on the wrong side of 40. You know, I've got, like I say, I've got damage in this hand, and I ain't going to go to benefits or anything like that. Can't be having any of that. What do I do? So, a friend of mine held his hand out, said, "Don't worry, my friend, we'll get through this." I picked up a tool bag, jumped in a work van, and I went back on the tools. I had a hammer in the morning, and rebuilt my life, even though I was told that would kill me. But I did it anyway, because I had to. I had Winky, the children to look after, and I needed to rebuild it. So I did. And worked during the day, sort of odd jobs. We set up Blue Star, so Winky can sort of make her life have meaning again, because we're all in the same factory. and I traded, and I built it up little by little till where we are today, where I didn't have to work the tools anymore. So I came off the tools. You know, fortunately I only had to do it for about a year. Built up Winky's confectionery shop, and I built up my trading pot, and now I talk to you guys on YouTube as well. So my road to being a trader was not an easy one. In fact, it was paved with every obstacle you could probably come across. But you can't give up. You have to push forward, and you have to constantly look at yourself in the mirror and think, I can do this. And I've been like that my entire life, you know, which is why sometimes I always say the best teacher is you. You know, nobody can teach you emotion, and nobody can teach you self-discipline. You either have it or you don't. And if you have it, you'll do very well in life, because losers will sit in the corner, suck their thumb and blame everybody, whereas the ones who are successful shrug their shoulders, roll their sleeves up and get on with it. And I'd like to think that's what I do. You know, I've had some terrible times in my life, but I need them.
I've made the wrong choices in my life. I turned left when I should have turned right. I don't want my pain taken away. I need my pain.
And the reason I need them is quite simply from that clip. I learn from them. And the charts do that for me as well. Every time I make a mistake, I learn from it. And I remember not to do it again. You know, and that's where journaling and all of that comes in it. So normally, at the end of these videos, I will always say something that I preach to my kids. Do what you love, and the money will follow. But today, I want to say something that my mother told me. The harder we fall, the stronger we stand. See you all on the next one.